We're back. It's the Security Weekly News, episode 149, and it's the week of 12 September 2021, and yeah, we were gone, and so happy autumn and all that stuff that sort of happened. Today, Pegasus, Revil Redux, really Pegasus Redux too, Revil Redux, WooCommerce, Kaspersky reports, Meris, workers going around security, imagine that, and litecoin shock. All this and Sinan, Eren from Barracuda on the Security Weekly News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals.
We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
It's the show that keeps you up to date on the latest security news twice a week, your trusted source for accurate security information and expert analysis. It's time for Security Weekly News. The complexity of cloud infrastructure means every organization's security challenges are unique. Whether your challenge is threat hunting, policy management, cloud workload protection, or all of the above, Uptycs helps you quickly identify and eliminate observability gaps in your security programs. Uptycs, analytics for the modern attack surface, observability for the modern defender. That's Uptycs, UPTYCS. Check them out at securityweekly.com/Uptycs for a free trial.
All right. Well, Pegasus is back. This was a piece of software that was originally developed by the NSO group in Israel, and it's essentially spyware for Apple products. I mean, that's what it is. And Citizens Lab at the University of Toronto, which is sort of a nonprofit kind of thing, they found that a Saudi activist's iPhone was infected with Pegasus like this week. And so this one, so Pegasus, we remember this from before, but this week when they found it, they found that this was a new, or I guess it was an existent, but it was a new use of a zero-click remote exploit. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically magic. So, you know, when it comes to hacking, it means, well, you could take over somebody's phone without actually touching it or getting them to do anything. So it's just like, okay, that's pretty scary. So Pegasus can pretty much capture whatever you're doing on your phone, and it sends all that info back to a central controller at NSO. And then the subscribers can access that information on the fly. And there was a lot of controversy about this back in July. But anyway, according to Citizens Lab, more than 1.65 billion devices have been vulnerable to this vulnerability since at least March. So the product was, I mean, it was a really big deal back in 2016 even when they first put this out. And there was a lot of controversy about this showing up on people's phones, who gets to use this, and all of a sudden there were people like activists and academics and journalists who maybe, you know, were saying things about other countries or what have you that were getting this stuff put on their phone and being tracked and maybe, having profiles of them and their movements and so forth. The most recent high-profile hit from this spyware, though, were in July when a list of 50,000 phone numbers that came out of the Pegasus project was released by Forbidden Stories and Amnesty International. So they went in and they got access to this. And as you might suspect, the phones, once again, belong to a lot of big shots. There was like 12 nation-state leaders. There was celebrities. There was, you know, on and on and on. And of course, a lot of these were activist people. So NSO Group then came under fire for that. But they basically said they only sell this product to governments, police, and military. And I remember when I was talking about this story back in July saying, yeah, government, there's never any bad governments around. There's no chance the military would misuse it. And you know, but they were like, hey, we don't know. You know, so I was like, to me, it would have been a better response if they just said, hey, look, you know, we're just a business. We sell it. If you want to use it for bad things, what can we do? But anyway, this is the current vulnerability is an image processing tool that is in Apple products, and they've named it forced entry. So Apple patched this on Monday with an emergency patch issuance, and Citizens Lab said, you better update your phone right now. That's a quote. I'm actually going to run, and I wrote on here, I'm actually going to run the update when I get finished with this, and I already did that because I put this together, and I said as soon as they finish, I'm going to run the update. I mean, you know, me being a big shot influencer and all, I figured there's probably at least a couple of nation states that want me dead, not to mention other people, and there was that incident at the monastery in France with the champagne and stealing it, and did I say that out loud? Okay, come at me, France. Do you even lift, poto? Yeah, okay, bring it on. Also, all right, Revil Redux. So Revil had been missing for about 2 months. So it was like, okay, and they sort of vanished, and they did this big attack, and then poof, they're gone. Their servers were down. Probably Revil wasn't actually missing at all. They were just hanging around in the break room somewhere, waiting for the next hacking event or whatever at the corporate hacking headquarters. But anyway, a Revil representative, which I always read these dark web stories and I'm just like, it just more and more it sounds like, it's just like regular corporate life. A Revil representative, like Hacker HR or something, answered some questions on their new site, and a new victim was listed there. But the big question everyone had was how did Kaseya get a universal decryption key that allowed the end of the Kaseya attack back in July? Okay. Well, Flashpoint reported that according to the Revil representative's post on the 10th of September, and this is a quote, that a programmer, quote, fat-fingered, or as we used to call it, five-finger death punch, which is a lot less offensive, but they apparently accidentally released the key generation tool, or they started the key generation tool and leaked it. The direct quote was, "One of our coders misclicked and generated a universal key and issued the universal decryptor key along with a bunch of keys for one machine." Yeah, he sleeps with the fishes. No, I made that last part up. But according to Advanced Intelligence, who was reporting all this is probably not true. They said the explanation, which sounded kind of weird to me, but they said it was, quote, ridiculous and, quote, makes no sense in how modern ransomware works. And, and it is a blind address called Revil making outlandish claims online. So, how could that not be valid? I mean, that's how we ended up with people drinking bleach and thinking there are lizard people living under Denver Airport. Really. I mean, Advanced Intelligence Rep Yelisi Boguslavsky, nope, not going to do it, not going there, said that they are pathological liars and that they are not, he said, they're not nearly as capable as what they state about themselves. So it sounds like one of those hackers slap fight Twitter wars getting ready to kick off between Revil and this Boguslavsky guy. But the Revil rep did say that they had been offline because they thought one of their former reps had been arrested and the servers might have been compromised. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of stuff in the story about that they use backups to get back online and all this. But they are back, and they'll probably be back in action soon. And do dark websites have HR reps? Probably. I mean, they customer service and such, like, da-da-da-da. We value your business and we'll be with you in approximately 1,200 minutes. Yeah. Remember the good old days when your shopping cart was an unencrypted cookie on your local machine? And you could just go in there and change the text and change the price of things. It had like a $3,000 hard drive is suddenly in your shopping cart for $3 and it actually worked. I mean, I didn't do that, but there are people who might have done stuff like that if we could identify who they are. Well, it's not that simple anymore, but WooCommerce, which is a WordPress plugin that is used on e-commerce sites, that plugin contains another plugin called Multicommerce that's made by Envato, which allows price setting for international prices. So this is how, when you go to a WordPress site that's selling stuff, it appears in euros or it appears in dollars or whatever. And it also does the conversions of those currencies to the current trading price. So the plugin actually uses a location detection and displays all that and and what have you, assuming you use it that way, which is why I always get prices in like rands or something. You'll never find me, I'm going to hide. But anyway, Ninja Technologies Network says there's a broken access control vulnerability in version 2.1.17 and below, which affects the fixed price, the import fixed price feature. This is an AJAX function that lacks the capability to check this. Essentially, it doesn't check who put something in there, and as such, anyone can access it. So what you have to do, though, it's not as simple as that old cookie thing I was talking about. The attack means you have to push a CSV file onto the site, which, it is WordPress, so I can't imagine that happening. And then that file can actually be used to change the price of products, and that could get really ugly. And that might be how I got that PlayStation 5 for 175 rand. Not that really happened either. A report for Kaspersky provided data from 2020 about security incidents that showed 63% of the incidents resulted from, wait for it, poor patching and password management practices. I mean, I fell out of my chair with shock when I saw that. I could not believe that there's people out there that don't patch and have poor password management. But, I've been saying that for a year and a half, so, you've been warned. But as you might expect, 0 days were a really small number on the chart, since it's a lot easier to credential stuff, brute force. You go guess good old Dragon Daddy 69's password is Dragon, and I couldn't spell Daenerys consistently, so just put Dragon in. Or use, a lot of times you could use old vulnerabilities too, as we've all seen. Brute force incidents rose from 13% of all the incidents reported in the study previously to 31.6% of the incidents in 2020. So apparently we're not only not doing better, we're actually doing worse. Unpatched exploits were the second largest category of attack, with all those older vulnerabilities before 2020 when they were collecting data being the most common ones. The most popular was CVE. Listen to this, CVE 2017 0144, which is the SMB remote code execution in Eternal Blue. Yep, no kidding. That was their most common patch exploitation. So, patch up. Yeah, use MFA, get 8 hours of rest and exercise daily, in that order. No, really, do the patching first. You can exercise when you're dead. Really. Yeah. Meris is a botnet that targets a Latvian network equipment brand MikroTik. So far, the Meris botnet has been estimated to contain around 200,000 bots, but there are more than 328,000 additional routers alone out in the world that are subject to this vulnerability. The current Meris incarnation is a distributed denial of service engine, but it can be adapted quickly and easily to do other things. But right now, it's a distributed denial of service engine that it generates a lot of traffic. An attack that occurred recently that targeted Brian Krebs hit about 2 million requests per second. But one of the largest assaults ever, which has ever occurred, is accredited to Meris, hit 21.8 million requests per second. And, so that's starting to sound kind of ominous. Now, you might expect it to just be the result of a 0 day, but nope, it's not. It's a patched vulnerability. Yep. And no one patched their routers. According to MikroTik, if you patched up and you reset your password, you probably are not infected. I know that the word probably in there, but you might be infected. Maybe you could be, but I don't know. But if you use these devices, there is some guidance for detecting Meris on your device, and of course, you need to patch and reset your passwords. Now, 22 million requests per second, which makes my old UDP flooding tool running on an abandoned Dell Optiplex seem kind of slow. Not that I actually did that. It was just a fantasy. That's what those cannibal people always use as an excuse when they get arrested. They always say, oh, no, I wasn't really trying to arrange to eat someone on one of those boards. I was really just fantasizing about it, and that's why I was a member of humanfleshlovers.com. Yeah. A new study from HP focused on situations IT teams are facing trying to improve cybersecurity for remote workers. We're going to talk about this more with Sinan in a minute. But in a survey of 1,100 IT decision makers and a survey of 8,443 office workers who are all remote, they found that IT often feels they have to compromise security in order to accommodate the remote workers. Imagine that. And that workers aged 24 and younger just flat out rejected cybersecurity measures and drove because they think the measures are clumsy and unimportant because, deadlines and such. 75% of the teams there said they were definitely sidelined in the interest of business continuity during the pandemic, and 91% of the teams said they felt pressured to compromising security in the interest of business practice. Over half of all the 24 and under workers said that cybersecurity was a hindrance, and 31% said they had bypassed corporate security to get their job done. Not that shocks me. I was an auditor in New York. Come on. I mean, it was all about how do you go around stuff. We could inspect your electrical system, or you can, maybe this way. Anyway, Sinan Eren is the VP of Zero Trust Security at Barracuda. And I thought we would talk about this story a bit because this is one of his particular interests, and it's one of the interests of that company. So I think we've all been sitting there trying to do something and just said, you know what? I'm just going to use the admin password just this once. So welcome, Sinan, and glad to have you here.
Glad to be on the show, Doug. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So have you ever had that experience where you've been pressured to like, look, we'll fix it later. We just got to get this up and running by Friday. So just turn the rules off in the firewall.
Pretty much every Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way everybody is. I think there's nobody who's a developer or a security person who has not been pressured to say, just get the email back working. Okay, we'll worry about all that fancy schmancy hacker stuff later. So just get the email back up, whatever it takes. Just do it. Like, could you sign this saying that? No, just do it. Yeah, I mean, I saw it a lot as an auditor.
Yeah. I mean, business continuity does trump security. That makes a ton of sense. There's nothing, I would say, new information in that. However, I do want to highlight that this attitude towards dunking on the millennials and the Gen Zs as being insensitive to security controls that business deploy, or they're going around and finding bypasses. Well, maybe we should take a hard look back at the security tooling itself, right? Are we building technology that enables them, that actually empowers them, helps them to be more productive, helps them with actually IT-related workflows rather than, 15, 20-year-old methodology of getting roadblocks in front of them, right? So that perhaps, the cybersecurity ISVs need to look back instead of saying that the Gen Zs and the millennials are going around and, bypassing security controls. Maybe there's something wrong with the controls.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean, security is supposed to help, right? Not hinder. And I mean, we've all been there. I mean, I'm there every day. I have clients, and they're like, "I'm sorry, you can't have this file. You can't put this file." I'm like, it would be so much more efficient if I put this file on this other machine and didn't have this little tiny laptop. And they're like, "Oh, sorry, nope, can't do it." And then I admit I've been tempted.
That's right. And, I've been in cybersecurity for over 20 years now, and I found out that the most successful cybersecurity companies do actually enable new use cases, right? And they help the end users, the admins, the IT ops, the SecOps teams to be more productive, to basically automate some of this labor-intensive tasks, help with streamlining their day-to-day workflows, right? So it's not necessarily a roadblock if you get it right. There's no reason why security tooling shouldn't be like the consumer apps, right? End user facing cybersecurity tools should be more like consumer. It doesn't matter if they serve enterprise, SMB, or mid-market. There's a big opening there, and I think vendors who see through that is going to make a big impact with the new generation coming into the labor force.
And that got really pushed to the forefront with the pandemic. I mean, I think I know, and I have clients, and I have people who call me, and when they started sending people home, it was just all bets are off. It was like, we got to keep the company running, take all that down. We're not worrying about it. We're not going to do that. And I mean, I guess all that kind of leads us back to zero trust, right? I mean, that's really where the zero trust theory stuff starts to come in. Would you mind? I know that's one of your specialties. So would you mind just telling the listeners like a little bit about what is zero trust? I mean, I know some of you know what it is, but just for some people who don't.
Sure. I mean, it is essentially at the very core is continuous authentication. Basically attesting to the end user's identity, but also continuous authorization, meaning, do you have explicit rights to access this part of application, the set of data? What it means is that if you're part of the HR group, well, you get to have access to the HR database. You can look up salaries, etc., right? If you're part of the finance, you get access to a certain, file share, right? So it is explicit access to whatever is granted to you. You're authorized, and then continuously verifying who you are. The best, I think, analogy I heard is basically gaining access to an airport terminal, right? The first thing they do is they check your identity. They attest that who you say you are, your identity, your ID card matches your plane ticket. The next thing is, of course, you need to get authorized. Okay, is your flight today? Are you on the right terminal in the right gate? Well, authorized, tick. Well, it doesn't stop there. There's one additional step, is that they put your luggage and carry-on through the X-ray, and that's basically the what we refer to as the attribute-based access control. You basically check the device's security posture, whether it's a healthy device with the patches like you were talking about deployed, does it have disk encryption, does it have endpoint security, and then you'll grant access. So the same thing, you have your carry-on, it goes through the X-ray. Well, now you're actually assumed to be secure because we looked into you, therefore you can get access to your gate. So I think that's kind of the best analogy. Check the identity, authorize whether you have the right to be there, and then go through the X-ray machine to see if you're okay, if your posture stands, and then let them through.
That is a really good analogy. I like it. So being older than you, I grew up in a world where I controlled everything. As a sysop, I was I was the iron fist in an iron glove, and with spikes, even like a really irony glove with lots of big spikes on it. And for us to do something like that was very simple because I controlled all my users. They were all in one place. They all went through one authentication process, and I controlled it. So I could delete them, I could block them, I could do all these things. But that's not really the way of today. So how do we get people to move from what is, I think, that's still that old mindset? So I think a lot of companies are still sitting there where I was 30 plus years ago, with this, everything's right there in one central spot, and I've got my iron fist wrapped around it. But that's not really true. And when we sent everybody home, it became even less true than ever. So you've got all these threat vectors coming into your networks from all over the place, from the cloud, from local, from VPNs. How do we get to what you were just talking about? How do we get to a better place where companies would have something like that?
Right. You basically controlled and operated a secure perimeter, like a corporate perimeter, and you were the benevolent dictator, right? You had the controls. You dictate how somebody's authenticated, authorized, what are the security criteria, what are the policies. But of course, now with everybody, distributed, decentralized applications, and public cloud becoming very dominant, but even more so SaaS applications becoming the main workhorse, you are losing that perimeter-centric controls, right? So the best approach that is in practice today and is growing, support is basically zero trust network access, right? Zero trust control. So essentially, at the core of it, you turn the perimeter notion upside down. There is no more perimeter. Everybody's distributed, everybody's decentralized. Even if they are inside the office network, you still consider them to be untrusted, right? No matter where they are, they're untrusted, and hence going back to the earlier analogy of continuously authenticating them and continuously authorizing them and continuously looking into their security posture through telemetry collection before granting them access to a company crown jewel, a valuable application or a data set, right? So everybody's untrusted, there is no more perimeter, you get continuously authenticated, you get continuously authorized, you get continuously assessed for your security posture, then you gain access. I think that's the way you go around with the evolving world.
Which sounds a lot like what we used to do. I like how you call me benevolent. I was not a benevolent dictator. I was a vicious, petty, whimsical dictator. But I mean that really is kind of getting back to that. It's just that perimeter that existed on the mainframe is now expanded to be the whole world. So it's really the same problem. I mean, so where do you see that evolving? I mean, how obviously people aren't doing that. I mean, the pandemic, I think, put a big stumbling block in a lot of security measures that were coming about, but it also drove a lot of stuff forward. Where do you think that goes in the future? I mean, is that going to become a standard or a rule?
I think so. What I see is the most transformational change, of course, besides migrating to public cloud, is going to be around building an identity fabric to basically enable access. And what I mean by that is we talk about identity in the context of users, but there's a lot of other components to this equation, right? We have IoTs, we have applications, we have devices, right? Endpoints. So I think identity is going to become ubiquitous across all these components. So essentially, you're going to have service identity. That a database, a web server, an application server is going to have its own identity, and it's going to get authenticated and authorized into accessing another application or another site perhaps in a different public cloud provider or in a different region or a different availability zone, right? So we are going to essentially take this notion of identity and access management and abstract it to a point that everything is identified, authenticated, authorized before they can access other parts of your network or other parts of your application, or devices can communicate with each other. Essentially, identity is going to become the most important enabler for connectivity and security.
I think that's already starting to happen. I mean, I know there's some stories recently from China about they're starting to put restrictions around, kids playing video games is a big story. Right. And one of the things that they mandated, which, speaking of dictators, one of the things they mandated in China was just that you could no longer be anonymous, that you had to actually have a real identity. You had to actually, like this identity fabric. So I agree with you. I think that we're going to see some kind of movement towards more identification of people and less anonymity of devices and all these kind of things. Because right now, it's scary. If you look, even you look at a home network and you go, "Wow, what's that?" I mean, I look at my home network all the time, and there'll be stuff there. I'm like, "What is that?" I get the MAC address, and I go, "What?" And I find out, it's it's not something illicit, but it's just something. Oh, my daughter brought this home and plugged it in the network, and it's like, okay, I didn't know what that was. You need to let me know this stuff when you plug things in. I mean, do you think that that's one of the big challenges of the next 2 or 3 years is going to be to try to transition to something like that?
That's right. I mean, we are doing things by, if you think about it, by network and IPs and ports, like the classic firewall approach or SD-WAN approach to network security, right? But I think that's going to get completely abstracted. Network is not going to matter. It's just going to be a conduit one, and then we're going to start building essentially controls and policies based around identity. Okay, it makes sense for this particular device identified as, attested and identified as, service A can have access to service B because there's a natural graph that assigns those access rights to this particular service, to this particular gadget, or to this particular data set, right? So once identity is abstracted away from network, we move away from securing things with network ranges. I think identity is going to give us a lot better fidelity and robust security controls to secure our everyday.
Yeah, I completely agree. Well, thank you, Sinan and Barracuda for being here. If you want to learn more about Barracuda, please visit securityweekly.com/Barracuda. Thanks, Sinan.
Thanks, Doug.
All right. And finally, a fake press release from Walmart. So it was fake, so it wasn't actually from Walmart. Said that the giant retail chain would start accepting Litecoin, and the value of the cryptocurrency went up 35% on the market yesterday. So this was in the morning. There was this fake news press release that said from Walmart. Real quickly, people noticed that the domain on the email was wall-mart.com instead of walmart.com without the dash. So, whatever happened to the days when all the off-brand names were porn sites? I mean, anymore, now who knows? But anyway, shortly thereafter, and probably right after whomever made the press release sold all their Litecoin for $237 per coin, the value of Litecoins dropped back to $177 per coin, where it had been trading for a long time. It's really the oldest stock market trick in the book. Long before cryptocurrency, this was a thing. Back in the 50s and 60s, they had pump and dump scans. They were done with phone banks and all kinds of stuff. I think there was even a story arc on The Sopranos or something about that, where they were pumping and dumping stocks with phone calls. Really? Oh, thanks, Sinan. Thanks for joining us today on Security Weekly News. I'll be back on Friday with a Security Weekly News wrap-up show. Please get your shots. Really, please.